meeting is provided by posting a copy thereof in the municipal bulletin board located in the Police Administration Building 169 Old Turnpike Road. Transmitting a copy to the Hunterdon County Democrat and the Hunterdon Review, filing with the municipal clerk on May 10, 2017.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do I have to read this other part too?
You do not. Now we're in public participation,
Okay.
and that's where we're at.
Okay. Is there anyone that has anything to do with public participation? Hi. State your name and address for the
Sure,
record.
my name is Nick Forcadelis. I live in Tewksbury.
Yeah.
And I don't go to other town meetings, but it's interesting to me, so I've come to yours. I appreciate you having me. I recently submitted an OPRA request for a document that was provided to me recently. It's a memorandum dated April 27th, 2017 to the Township Committee. As a matter of fact, why don't I, just a copy that I give it to the clerk as a reference. It's a memo from the Township Committee from Jess Landon, who understands the Township Administrator regarding personnel files. It's just one sentence, I'll read it to you. It says, I have given Peter the personnel files as directed for safekeeping to remain sealed until my replacement starts, and the document is signed by Mr. Mielek. What I'd like to ask is this true? Was Mr. Landon directed to have the personnel files removed from your offices?
The way I understand it is he had asked if he didn't want to leave them in the office that wasn't locked with us not being here, and he asked if they would be, Peter or...
Well, I could explain the whole thing.
Thanks.
Well, we met with, Sean and I, we had met with Jess, because I forget the exact date, but just prior to his leaving, for the last couple days, we were asking about, whatever, his transition, so to speak, and one of the things that came up was the office. We said, well, because his office wasn't locked normally. He has the key for the office, and he would lock it. The other thing was, the personnel files are in there. I said, well, are they able to be secured? And he said, well, they're in that filing cabinet, but there was no key for that or whatever. So I said, well, what are we going to do with them? So, because I'm around during the day, he said, I'll call you or whatever. Or I said, call Dana first, because she's the mayor. And she was away. So she couldn't do it. So I was like, all right, I'll take them and secure them in my office. Because so they at least will be locked. Because there's 5 people that are allowed to look at those.
You have an office here?
What's that?
You have an office here?
No, my home office or business office. So I called Michael, our attorney, and explained that what we're doing. He said, okay. And then, so I just took them. They were sealed, signed the thing, and Then questions came up. Michael, I guess, had misunderstood me.
Yeah, I misunderstood.
So, and then he said, so we brought them back and I put them in the evidence room. So they were gone. They were away for like an hour.
I'm former mayor of Clinton Township, so I'm familiar with these kinds of projects. Who's your legal custodian of documents? When I submit an OPRA request?
Well, the personnel files aren't government records. Our custodian of the government records is Roberta.
Okay.
Personnel files are not a government record. So she wouldn't have supervision over those. So that would be within the administrator's purview.
So if I were to submit an OPRA request for an employee's personnel file, would you approve that?
No.
Why?
Because it's not a government record. Personnel file is not a government record.
Okay, so can anyone in the township walk in and look at personnel files there?
The only person that can look
the employee can look at their personnel file,
Their own.
obviously.
Like their own.
Yeah, and then, you know, their supervisor, if something arose, but remember, the public couldn't, you know, ask to see, you know, Roberta's personnel file, for instance.
Could the mayor or a committee member go look at the files?
If they had to, yeah, they could.
Under what circumstances would it be?
If there was an employee decision that had to be made, reviews, you know, for merit increases or performance evaluations.
So under what legal authority were the files removed from the building?
The files, as I said, I misunderstood the request. When it was explained to me what had happened, that's when they were directed to come back to this office. And I say this building, because it really wasn't this office. It went downstairs because I think that was the first time you discovered that there was really no security for the files.
Yeah.
You know, that was the problem. I mean, the file cabinets didn't lock or anything else. That's when they were put into the evidence locker until there were ways, and I believe since then there's locks.
Yep, it's
on
locked. And I'm the only one that has
files
the
and
keys to the
everything.
locks.
So, again, with all due respect, I'm trying to be respectful here, I'm not trying to be argumentative with you. When Mr. Landon was administrator, how were the documents secured while he was here if there was no lock?
He locked his office. He had the keys to his office. He was the supervisor. He would lock his office, which the files were in his office. So when he would leave at night, he would take his keys and lock his office. That's how they were secured by him, I guess. And no one else has a key to his office. So when he left and turned the keys over, he called the day he was leaving, the day before, and asked me if I could pick up the keys and his cell phone. I said, I'm away at a horse show, I can't do it. He then called and had a meeting with Peter and Sean, and that's how the keys got there. You know, that's how they got to, the files got to them.
So I'm confused, if there's a lock on his door and he had the lock, and while he was key. While the door was locked while he was employed here, everything was secure. So when he left, there's still a lock on the door and there's a key, and the door's secure. So why would he remove the personnel files from his office when the door can be locked and someone, the mayor, would have the key, turn the key over to you?
Right, I
Because
wasn't
I
here.
think the reason was there was a lot of other files in the office that people would need access to.
Right.
You know, like, say,
Right.
road plans, you know, certain things like that, whatever.
And what he says here is, I've given Peter the personnel files as directed. Again, but direction is not permission, it's, you know, I'm telling you to go do something.
I didn't tell him to give the files to anyone. I'm not.
Did
Well,
the committee take an action to?
Neither did the township committee. That's
Right.
just clear that for the record. I don't think we did.
Well, maybe directed what it was as discussed at our,
Well, what he says in the memo is as directed.
I know what it is.
I gave Peter the personnel files as directed. And then Mr. Millet signed for the documents, and we're 14, 47 hours.
Maybe what he's saying.
Look, the bottom line is, he authored it, we don't know what he intended. I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't think anybody here, except maybe Peter, knew what he meant by that, by direction or anything else. It could have been used in a different context.
It was reference to the conversation that Peter and I had with him. That was the
Maybe that's
reference.
what it was.
I mean, Lou was correct. The township committee didn't vote on it, didn't, you know, authorize it, if that's the appropriate term.
So when you say it was reference to your conversation, did you authorize them to do it or direct them to do
It
it?
didn't authorize him to do it. We had a discussion, and I expressed the concern about if the office was going to need to be left open so that other employees could get whatever files, that they didn't have access to those files. And that was when it came up in the conversation. I said, well, why don't you take them and hold them until, you know, the appropriate time when they could be transferred to his successor. And so, in hindsight, was it the appropriate thing to do? No, it wasn't. It was, you know, came out of the conversation that occurred. There wasn't any intent. There wasn't anything nefarious.
I mean, I think the concern was, we were having this conversation, was we didn't want to leave them in a place
Right.
where just anybody could come in who had access, come and go, and could look through somebody else's personnel file, and then you have accusations of that nature. That's what we were trying to guard against.
According to your minutes, Mr. Landon gave notice to the committee at a meeting in March. And then 2 days before he leaves his job, a month later after he gives notice, it's suddenly decided what's going to be done. I'm concerned about this as someone who's been a mayor. It's just an example. When I became mayor, 2 or 3 months into it, our administrator several years resigned. And I had to go hire a new administrator. She always kept her door locked. It was always locked. Even when she was in the bathroom, she would lock the door and she would go out, she'd come back and open the door. I hired the new administrator shows up. He says, what's behind that door? I said, well, that's your office. And he said, well, why is it locked? I said, well, here's the key. I gave him the key. And he he turns to the staff and he said, this door will never be locked because you all need access to materials in here. You need to be able to come and go. And again, it's a question of how you manage your offices, and it's up to every town to decide for themselves. But I found it very puzzling that, to me, it's just a very odd, I have given Peter the personnel files as directed, and clearly there was no direction given to Mr. Landon in an official capacity or in a legal capacity, any legal authority to remove what even your attorney says are what are considered very sensitive files. So if I were to submit an OPRA request for someone's personnel file, you wouldn't give it to me because it's not considered a public document, and it's considered a confidential, private document that could impact a person's life. So what concerns me, and it may be obvious, Mr. Landon's going to work with Clinton Township. What concerns me is a memo like this where he claims he was directed to remove sensitive documents. And again, this is not, Mr. Millick, I'm not accusing you of anything. You take the documents home to your office, wherever, and they were there for what period of time?
An hour and a half at most.
Again, I'm not accusing you of anything, but in the big world, who knows what happened to the documents during that time? Who knows whether anything was put in, taken out, with the documents reviewed to make sure nothing was put in or taken out? As a citizen, I'm concerned about this kind of thing. Legal authority means something very specific to me. And when a public official says, I did something as directed, when in fact there was no direction, to me this memorandum is a patent misrepresentation, and it's a lie. He was not directed to do something.
Well, like I said, as discussed would have been better instead of as directed. Because we didn't have a meeting, so we couldn't direct him.
He was administrator how many years?
20-something?
No.
18 years.
What I'd suggest to you, again respectfully, he knows the difference between directed and discussed. He used the word directed in here, and that concerns me greatly. So I just
Let me comment. I haven't really said anything on this, but I mean, in fairness to everybody in this room here, the word mistake or misrepresentation or error in communication has been thrown about. I think what happened here was a result of that. I can't speak to what his intent was with his language, but I understand that the advice of counsel was sought before anything was taken. Counsel misunderstood what was to be taken. The advice was given, and then it was discovered that what he understood was not correct. And so then it was remedied as best it could be by the return of the files. Is that fair to say, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know what your impression, what was told to you was, what was taken was intended to be taken or not taken. That's between you and whoever you spoke to about that. But when I got involved in it, and it was brought to my attention by a complaint from folks in the office here that all the files were being taken, I immediately reached out to people, including Michael, and we squared it away, and like Peter said, within an hour and a half, 2 hours, the files were returned. I agree with you. If it was a criminal matter and this was evidence, we'd have a real problem with chain of custody and that kind of stuff, but that's not what we have here. So,
Also, too, just if I may interject, the files did not go out of your possession.
No.
So, I mean, he does have, as a township committee person, access to those files. So the suggestion, quite frankly, that something nefarious went on when he's acknowledged that he had possession of them is patently false. I mean, he held possession of them.
I'm not suggesting anything.
Well, you did.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that when he had the files, This is not a court, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not trained. Could I ask you what your impression was when you were asked?
When I had found out what had happened, that's when I called Peter. I said, look, let's move him to the police, the police locker.
What was your impression when you were asked about doing this? What was it?
My initial, I thought there was a record within the personnel files that was being discussed. I didn't realize all of the personnel files were going to be carted out. But I mean, I had the discussion with you. Then Lou had called, and I said, well, wait a minute, that's not what I thought it was. And within 45 minutes, the issue was rectified.
So the files were returned?
Immediately. I mean,
And that was a Thursday.
Whatever.
It was a Thursday.
Thursday afternoon.
And then Mr. Landon left, his last day of work was the next day?
Friday, but he took the day off,
I think he had a death.
So it's really-
personal day or
So
something.
it was effective
His
his
uncle
last
passed
day.
away, so.
Yeah.
So when the files were brought back, they were put back into the file, back into the office where they would have been to begin with?
No,
No.
they did not.
Okay.
When I got back that following Monday, I went with the police, 2 policemen and Roberta downstairs, and we walked them up together, 4 of us, and I placed them without opening them into a lock. When we went and got a file cabinet with a lock with only 1 key, 2 keys but for separately, and I put them in that. I didn't open them. I did it in front of the police chief and put them in the personnel file. I locked the door, locked the key, and the office remains open.
I'll just tell you anecdotally, again, what I flash on thinking about this stuff, a former mayor of Clinton Township once used to take vouchers home to sign them. And when his term ended, it was discovered that boxes of vouchers were missing. Turned out they were in the trunk of his car, because he just forgot about it. So the idea of someone taking public documents home for safekeeping, again, I'm not accusing you of anything.
I mean, they were sealed up with tape. Why would I look?
You were asked to take them home.
I mean, if I want to look at them, I could look at it
Again,
here.
I asked myself, why would someone with Mr. Landon's experience not just take them down to the evidence locker, not call the police department and say, hey, you guys have secure space, why wouldn't you just put them down in
I
there?
don't know, but the police didn't want them in the evidence locker either. So they don't belong there, which is why they wanted them out immediately. So, they didn't belong there either. So it was just as much.
And was there any kind of transition plan, since he resigned over a month before he left, was there any kind of transition plan established for, so you're going to leave after 17 years, 14 years, whatever, here's what we're going to do for the transition, including, you would think, secure documents being, was that ever discussed by the committee, ever direct the clerk or the administrator on what kind of transition to do with things like that?
I didn't have any discussion at all.
Well, that just came up, but that was like a oversight, whatever, just like, this one file cabinet where everything is kept in. It's like a wall unit, more or
I
less.
don't think we would have any idea that the file couldn't be locked.
It just
And
didn't
the door
even think,
was
no, I didn't even think of
So there's a
it.
whole filing cabinet you got to carry out.
No. Well, they put these in boxes. These were like 2 boxes like this.
2 boxes, and they were sealed with, when
They
I
probably weighed
opened
like
them.
40 pounds a piece.
Right. When I opened them, the tape was clear tape, that was the packing tape that was sealed completely.
I mean, sure, we talked about other transition items a lot,
Again, I didn't come here to accuse anyone of anything. If I came across that way, I apologize. I'm just concerned that someone with this much experience would do something like this and remove documents from a public office and taking someone's house. It could have been your house, anybody's house, or wherever. I find that very troubling, and this whole business about stating and writing as directed.
Well, it wasn't, I didn't take it to my house, I took it to my business office,
Okay.
which
Yeah, sure. And again,
it was completely secure, it was locked, so.
again, when a public official with this kind of experience says, I was directed to do this when he wasn't directed to do this, I find that really troubling.
So I guess I have a question, and
Yeah,
it
sure.
seems like we're kind of beating around the bush. Is your issue with Jess, of what Jess wrote, as if Jess had this experience and Jess should know better? Or is your issue with that, the
What
files?
was done with the files?
I kind of, it's like this elephant in the room and nobody's talking, and it's like
I
stupid.
apologize.
Explain to me what's going on.
My issue is not with Tewksbury, with your committee, with anyone here.
I appreciate that, go ahead.
No, not at all. My concern is that a top-level manager, arguably the most important employee, I was a mayor for 3 years. I had an administrator for 3 years, who stayed for 10 years. I think an administrator in a town of our size is arguably the single most important person working for the township. With all due respect,
No.
as a mayor too, including the mayor, because they transition across. So when an administrator from one town comes to my town, and I consider the fact that there was no competitive interview. Well, I'm sorry.
I had no idea.
I apologize. When you came in at the very end. I'm Nick Borcadillo's former.
I do, I know your name, but I
I'm
didn't
sorry.
know that, okay.
And you wrote an article to that effect in the Hunter Review or something like that, that basically there was only 2 candidates, they dismissed those, they hired Jess, and they brought him in.
There was really no competitive process. I was very
Exactly, so that's
concerned
what you
about
addressed
whether
in that article.
And
Recently?
And I misunderstood this whole, okay.
I apologize. You came in at the end. I introduced myself when folks came in, and I didn't want to disrupt it.
So I appreciate your concern of what you have now.
So my concern is for my town, it has nothing to do with Tewksbury and one individual's behavior. Obviously, we work with Clinton Township now, which concerns me greatly. So I don't want to take any more of your time. I know these sessions, when you do them early in the morning, is something we're specifically going to work on executive session. And I apologize for taking so much of your time. I appreciate your taking the time to do it. Pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay,
Good luck.
what's next on?
I move we go into executive session.
Is there a second?
Discuss personnel.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so let's go ahead and shut those. Session then.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so,
You gotta come out and then you...
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay. Where are we at? We want to,
Is there a bill for any of these, or?
I'm sorry?
Is there a bill for any of these?
I didn't keep track.
All right.
You see the dates on it, they probably go back a couple of
No,
months.
just-
Don't worry about it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The only action we have is,
yeah, we're gonna
well,
try
we could
to.
talk about
preliminary.
that's a preliminary thing, isn't it?
You want to
So
go?
I move we authorize the mayor to contact this,
Sean Connery?
Sean Connery.
Sean
The
Cannery
Cannery
Group for administrator services, I guess is the,
Okay, so that's.
with
a
the,
move
with
for
the,
a
and to
motion.
request
Is there a
a,
second?
I'll second that.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And we're going to have another meeting based upon when they can meet and their availability, either Monday or Wednesday
next week,
or
right?
next week, correct? Okay, so that's it.
All right.
Do you have anything you wanted to discuss?
Nope.
Okay.
Lou,
All
we
right.
gotta see about meeting with Hayden, what's,
Want to walk over there?
Can I get,
well, all right, we gotta do the same thing with
can I get a
Marie
motion to
here.
adjourn first?
Real quick. if you
Move
got
we
that.
adjourn.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Can I have,